In this video, I'm going to set up AAA authentication to a Radius server from router R1 to my Radius server at PCA. To do this, I'll need to configure the Radius commands on the router as well as set up the Radius server. Let's get started. I've launched the WinRadius server. You can see here from the message that 0 users were loaded, so I'll need to create some users. WinRadius is running and using authentication port 1812 and accounting port 1813. The secret is WinRadius. I'm going to change the secret. So I'll go to Settings, System, and I'll change the secret from WinRadius to WinRadius secret. You can see that the authorization port is 1812 and the accounting port is 1813. Also, I'll need to create some users. I'll go to Operation, Add Users, and I'm going to add a few users. My first user will be admin01, and the password will be admin01pass. I'll add another user, capital RAD, rad user for Radius user, and the password capital RAD, capital PASS. So now I have 2 user accounts that I've added to the WinRadius server. Since I've changed the secret key, I'll need to restart the server. The server has restarted and you can see that I have 2 users loaded. If you have any problems running the WinRadius server, try running it with administrative permissions or with the preferences set to Windows XP Service Pack 3. Now that the WinRadius server is running, I'll switch to my console connection to router R1. I'll type enable and conf T to get to global configuration mode. Now the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm planning on using SSH to remotely connect into my router but have the WinRadius server handle the authentication. If I'm going to use SSH, I'm going to need a domain name. So I'll type IP domain-name Cisco-Academy and set the domain name. Next, I'll need some cryptographic keys if we're planning on using SSH. So I'll type crypto key generate RSA general keys modulus 2048. My security keys have been created and SSH has been enabled. I'm going to need a fallback in case my Radius server fails. To do this, I'm going to create a local user account on the router. I'll type in username admin local. I'll use the algorithm type command and set it to script and set the secret to Cisco 12345 just for example purposes. Now that that's done, I'll need to enable AAA authentication. So I'll type AAA and then new model, and that enables AAA authentication. Now I'll set my AAA authentication login methods. The first login method that I'll set will be the default login method, and I'll set the group to Radius, so we'll use Radius first, but if the Radius server is not available or fails, I'll set a secondary default authentication to the local user database. I'm also going to need a AAA authentication login, and I'll name this method list SSH_radius. This method list will rely solely on the Radius server. My 2 AAA authentication login method lists have been created, and now I need to configure the Radius server. I'll type in Radius server and give it a name, my rad. And now I'll set the address. The address of the server is address IPv4 192.168.1.3. That's the PC that has the WinRadius server. I'll set the authentication port to 1812 and the accounting port to 1813. By default, the Cisco router uses ports 1645 and 1646 to handle radius authentication and radius accounting. The RFC standard ports are 1812 and 1813, and those are the ports that my WinRadius server is using. I'll also need to set the key, so I'll type in key 0 and set the key to our WinRadius secret, which is WinRadius secret. Now my Radius server configurations are complete. I'll need to set up my line console 0 and my line VTY. So line console 0, login. I'm going to use AAA authentication, the default method list. For line VTY 0 to 4, I'm going to use transport input SSH, and my login authentication list is SSH underscore radius. Before I exit the router and try this out, I also want to set my enable secret. To do this, I'll use the algorithm type to script and set the secret to class 12345 for example purposes. I'll save my configuration with a copy run start command, and now I can test out my Radius server. To test it out, I'll exit out of the router, log back in, but I'll use my user account that I created on the WinRadius server. That username was admin01 and the password was admin01pass. You can see that I got into the router just fine. If we look at the Radius server, you can see that the authentication happened and was okay. User admin01, authenticate, okay. Now, what if the Radius server was to go down? I'll go to Operation, Exit. I'll exit out of my router, and now I'll try to get in. If I use the admin01 account and put in admin01pass, it's going to fail because the WinRadius server is no longer available. Let's try the admin local account that I created as a failsafe. I'll put in the username admin local and the password Cisco12345. And you can see that I logged in. With the Radius server unavailable, the router defaulted to the local user database to handle the login. Excellent. I'll exit out of the router, restart the WinRadius server, and this time I'll try to SSH into the router. I'll open up PuTTY and choose SSH, put in the IP address of the router, and hit open. You can see I'm prompted to accept the router's security keys. I'll click yes. And you can see I have a prompt that says login as. I'll type in capital R, rad, capital U, user, and the password, capital R, rad, capital P, pass. And you can see I've logged into the router. I can exit out and log in again as admin01 and the password admin01pass. And as you can see, I've successfully SSH'd into the router using the Radius server for the authentication.